been there for about 7 years, but again, we're back, I made it go. So, good. I was scared in my car, I never remember making inside, so I gotta do better.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm going to step aside here. I'm Patty Edmonds, and I'm a member of the Formation Committee. And I actually typed up notes to introduce them this morning. I'm not doing well, and my computer didn't want to communicate with the printer. So I'm just going to go by my memory on this, but those of us who are lucky enough to attend the Women's Retreat had a class with Matt. And we're very blessed to have that. As you know, in this church, we have a lot of people that have talent and skills and education that we avail ourselves of. And when I called Maddie, Dr. Madeleine Lowman, and asked her if she would do this, here she was pregnant, and getting ready to have her first child. She just said, and that always amazes me that people are so willing to and really get to the church, and so I can't thank you enough. She did go to school here at UNCG, started math and a PhD. If I understand correctly, you do deal with trauma and stress, and have to focus on that. So perhaps you all are familiar with her. If not, we're in for a real treat. So I'd like to open up with a prayer, if I may. Dear God, thank you for this beautiful birth and study and safety. Help us to be real with each other and with you together. Give us courage to be honest and to talk to those who trust. We want to experience the hope, freedom, and peace that comes from honest, open conversation and hearts with you and others. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
As I was in the parking lot, I realized I forgot my name tag. But I do every week. So my name is Maddie. I'm glad to be with y'all. And I'm gonna see about figuring this out. I think it's just a touch screen, but we started last week a series on how to support people with navigating stress for the holidays. And Karen led an excellent workshop on kind of identifying different stressors that we could come across. And I felt like that was a really normalizing and validating conversation, and glad to see so many of y'all here this morning. So I'm going to continue that as kind of part 2 of a 3-part series and talk a little bit about maybe tools that we can have as we head into the holidays, after we've discussed that stress is a pretty inherent part for some of you all. Myself included. So just as a recap for last week, what kinds of stressors come to mind when you think about holidays? Like, what are some just like, shout them out, like topics that feel challenging?
If you read this morning's headline in our local paper, 20% of the people at the collection agencies after them for medical debt. Okay, and it's good. Can you imagine dealing with that? Some people calling you all the time, knowing you owe so much money.
Yeah,
It's so stressful.
absolutely. Yeah, so finances, medical bills, how about others? Deadlines, yep, for work, family, or both?
Family conflicts.
Family conflicts. I feel like there's a host of things that can come up. I put a few here. Ones that stand out to me are when we get with family, if we do get with family for the holidays, time and travel, those feel like the hardest ones for my family to navigate, because all of my family lives in South Carolina or Georgia. And so typically my husband and I travel across the Southeast like 7 weeks in a row, and it takes a lot out of us, but we're glad to see family. And then once we get there, we're navigating things like grief, maybe from the year, we're navigating things like substance use, and just like everybody's kind of family system dynamics pulled out for this special time that everybody's supposed to be happy and celebratory. And that can be a real struggle and challenge. I think other pieces that could come up that we talked about last week are finances, like expectations around gift giving, or different pieces like that that can come to play across family members. And so I wanted to, like, if we can assume that stress is going to be an inherent part of, I think, our lived experience, but especially around the holidays, like what we're talking about today. A couple tips that I think could be supportive are ways to think about our positionality in relation to stress. So a lot of times we talk with clients about an internal or an external locus of control. So an internal locus of control is the idea that I can impact my environment. I can have some kind of effect on the way I experience reality. And an external locus of control is the idea that my environment just impacts me. I'm kind of along for the ride until things calm down. I can't calm down. Does anybody have any types of family members who stick out with one or the other? For example, my mother, she has a very external locus of control. So if everything around her is calm, then she can be that way. But when she's telling me about stressors that she's having at work, like she's just like, well, you know, until my boss does this, this, and this, it's going to be like, I just can't be regulated, or I can't experience this more positively. So really the idea that I can't affect change can put us at a disadvantage. One thing that happens, I think, in the church community that I've noticed is the suggestion, and this will be my personal experience and not with people at this church currently, but the idea that you just need to pray about your problems and move right through, and then you won't have problems. And that was stuff, that was early messaging that I got, I think, like, yeah, a lot younger and in my teen years. And that I mean, that's a nice belief. And I think the sentiment is lovely, and there's a lot of power in prayer, absolutely. But it also left me with a belief that I can't influence change, that I really just need, I give it to God, and then I things will work out. I do think that's true. And I also think God can support us with more actively engaging with our environment and having conversations and navigating conflict more actively. For more health, I think, across relationships and across dynamics. So in general, if we can think of ourselves as capable of influencing change, then I think we're in a lot better position to resolve some of the things that seem cyclical. So puts us in a position to engage with concerns. I'm curious about the group. And if we're thinking about conflicts that can come up for you at the holidays, like what are some examples, or what are some things that might come across in your family dynamic around this holidays?
I have 2 daughters. I feel like they're competitive for my attention. I've actually had one say you prefer the other to me. And that's difficult.
Yeah, how about others? So maybe family competition.
Everybody being busy and pulled in different directions and trying to get yourself centered enough that you can take each thing in its own step and not the guy that's hoping to do it all one time. I'm probably speaking mostly for myself. See there.
Yeah, so I think expectations and who kind of keeps up the traditions, or who puts on hosting or things like that.
Joyfully, my oldest is getting married in 8 months, Memorial Day, but this holiday will be the first time really they're going to be going from houses to houses and trying to maybe accepting the sharing her and her family and welcoming and kind of merging families is really scary.
Yeah, absolutely. So even just the idea that you might need to grieve some of the traditions and the time that you're used to, and realize that there's an expansion happening for her, that will just change the way things feel, for sure. Yeah, how about others? Yeah, Jeff.
We had a huge thing a year or so ago about vaccination. We were wanting people to come to our home and be vaccinated, and some members of our family were like, we're not going to do that.
Right.
And it made for some very difficult negotiations and decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah, anything else come up for people? Mhm. Then this might be one of the first years that more families gathering. Not sure what your circumstances. We haven't done a lot of family stuff, I think, since 2019. So this will be the first year for my family to spend more time together since we travel. So I mean, there's potential for a lot to come up at the holidays. Yeah.
I know that acceptance is the key to all of this, but acceptance is really hard.
Mhm.
I am the king of expectations. I have romantic visions of what Christmas used to be like.
Yeah.
Holidays used to be like. I spent a lot of my life trying to recreate it.
Mhm.
And now it's an impossibility, and there's a resentment that comes with that. There are wounds that get reopened every year. And I know that acceptance of just it'll be what it'll be. I know that in my head, in my heart. I'm the problem. I mean, I can't accept it. And it's just hard.
Mhm. Great, I think if it was easy to change, you'd already have done it. And I think that makes a lot of sense and rings true too, that just accepting that things could be different than the way we remember it, but navigating everybody's expectations in one little microcosm can be a lot. I think there's a lot of room for activation and stress. Yeah. That's all one more doing.
Yeah, I was gonna share, I think it's all a great way to. I'm sure this idea, but it's something to the effect of conspiracy and justice. If there's a member of a family who's done something that is, discrepant from everybody else, and there's a lot of whispering, there's a lot of discussion behind, it's not very usual, it's not very cooperative. It's not. And I think that's not just my this is my husband. It's so hard with the holidays, it can actually be just accepting everybody where they are. And who they are, just,
Yeah.
It's such I think it's building it's incredibly challenging.
Yeah, and I'm hearing in that like some just family secrets or the way we talk about certain things or don't talk about certain things when there's rupture. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody loves conflict. I really enjoy productive conflict, and I feel isolated in my own family system. I feel like there's a lot of dysregulation around conflict, so we just don't have arguments, and that's hard. Yeah.
It's that we have family members that live, my siblings, we are in 4 different states. And my mother is in one. And so there's no way that we're not all be together probably in double. This is probably this year, but we were able to see to be flexible when we went out to Missouri a couple of weeks ago. And we spent time with those family members since it wouldn't be a Thanksgiving or Christmas. And that seemed to work really well. And we didn't know whether or not, but it was like perfect. And it's we got grandkids and my stepson was here. So we always do Thanksgiving with them, but the ones that have a little child up in Missouri, we always do that for Christmas. So we finally worked it all out. And nobody seems to be mad.
That's beautiful.
So it's wanted people that are struggling to know that you can get through it.
It's possible, yeah. Well, it sounds like flexibility was key there, like, right, to arrange maybe visits outside of the 2 weekends at the end of the year. And allowing yourself to kind of feel into what works a little better. We have a 10-week-old baby at home now, and this is the first year we've said family can come to us, which is I'm feeling a lot of relief about, and then my partner is feeling a lot of stress about because he's used to, like, he's just such a dreamer. And he really just like has nostalgia for the way things were at his parents' house. And he's like, I want to wake up there and that's going to be like what I want Ellie to experience too. And I was like, yeah, but we live here 6 hours away and building something of our own will be challenging. We also now have our parents are stepping into roles of grandparents. And I think that that's been challenging for them to maybe stand in what feels more authentic for them versus what the other person's doing. And so, yeah, a lot of change. And so thinking about maybe how can we bring flexibility into a space to help with expectations is one way to support it, but just the idea that you don't have to keep doing something because it's the way it was always done. If you are going to transition from the way things were, there's grief that can come up, right? And that can be really challenging to feel into. But I do think, you know, myself and then the people, at least that I work with and that I know and love, it's really hard to change family things. I think family can feel really set in stone. And it doesn't have to be that. I think there's a lot more health with more dynamic relationships. If we can learn how to support each other with the understanding that like it's hard to engage when you're not feeling your best, or, you know, if everybody's feeling stressed during the holidays, then you're not interacting in that full authenticity that you might want to show up.
Is that the kind of constructive conflict that you say you sometimes enjoy?
I love constructive conflict. Yep.
Is that
Yeah, a great segue. Thank you. I think the way we talk about things matters. And so I'll talk with families, I'll talk with my family about, and my clients. If I can tell that somebody cares for me when we're disagreeing, then we have a lot better trajectory on how things are going to play out, right? And that's a really hard thing to do when you're really, like, if you're fuming at somebody, it's hard to demonstrate care with them when you engage in conflict or discussing conflict. I think what can be most helpful is assertive communication. So the idea that I can disagree, I can be clear and kind and direct with you, and we move forward. It's not a thing to take personally, but a thing to take seriously. And that's where I think it can be really challenging for people to get feedback that they're not asking for, maybe, but also to give feedback that they're not used to giving. So a lot of times I work with clients and they're talking to me about their partner, their best friend, their mom, their boss, and they have a lot of thoughts and a lot of clear ideas about what could go better. And I'll say, yeah, what do you want to take responsibility over owning to bring into the dynamic and shifting a little bit more directly, rather than waiting for them to change so that you can feel better. So a lot of times we can get into 3 different categories of communication. We've got passive, aggressive, or assertive. So passive communication is the comments from family that's like, oh, it'd be nice if we saw you more. And that feels like a criticism, or like, I don't know, does anybody have examples of passive communication that stand out to you?
Works 2 ways.
That's a good one. Phone works 2 ways. I've said that one before. How about others?
Sometimes passive means just sucking it off
Yeah, maybe not engaging.
and just internalize it and let it be on somebody.
Absolutely, which is not great. Yeah, so maybe just withdrawing, so not engaging. So passive communication can be silence. Any other phrases that stand out to people? Or if you can think of a time where somebody tried to give you feedback and it was like really, really vague, and they really thought they were communicating with you.
I guess I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure that I'm probably passive in a lot of my communication with in conflict, in part because I'm not so sure that anything good would come out of a conversation. If I feel like all it's going to do is make it worse, then it, like Hilda said, you know, just to back out of it or try not to engage in whatever it is that creates the conflict in the first place. It would be nice if, and I'm thinking of one particular one, but you know, in this particular setting, I think nothing good will come out of it.
Yeah.
So why go there?
Right.
Just
choose your battle, there's unresolved battles to be chosen.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think you make a great point that there's reasons that we fall into whatever camp. And I think in certain relationships, we can have a style that is more dominant or one that's more withdrawn based on how we expect the conflict to go. So if I don't think a conversation is going to be futile, then I don't want to put my energy into possibly disrupting things more, right? And so I might withdraw. Yeah.
The elder here has taught me in the South, you can shake your head and say, bless their little hearts.
Uh-huh.
Means, it's hopeless. So, not at all.
That's what you mean. All righty.
Yesterday I bought airplane tickets to my home where I was seeing, or we were seeing my siblings. And it was expensive, it was the trigger, but really, they never come down and see us.
Mhm.
And I grieve my family, but I'm pissed. And so I barked, and she knew I was barking and scared, would watch what else I could do, but I just said, I'll get over this. I'm hurt.
Mhm.
But that's an example of warped communication,
Mhm.
because here I'm mad at these airplane tickets,
Yeah.
nothing to do with airplane tickets.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
I think about what might encourage some of these communication styles also is just, being a tribe, being family members that have different values.
Mhm.
Some people are givers, they want to host, they want to go out of the way, they do all the shopping, for very elaborate gift giving.
Mhm.
And others that just want to show up and they don't take.
Yeah,
And if there's not, your reciprocity may not be there.
absolutely.
And I think, that's where these communication styles can kind of really,
Mhm.
is this kind of unequal appreciation for what holidays mean, what we should be doing as a family member.
For sure. And how to kind of stick in those norms or
I
change
also
them.
like vote differently.
I run into that, yes.
I really learned that.
Yeah.
It's so hard to please everybody when you are, particularly young marrieds.
Mhm.
You want to please your mom and dad, you want to please his mom and dad, you want to please everybody. And you wind up being frazzled.
For sure.
I remember when my first son was born, I was married before then. Well, and my first son was born, and my parents lived in North Carolina, and my husband's parents lived in Summit, New Jersey. My parents always celebrated Christmas on Christmas Eve, and then Christmas Day was just very relaxed. His parents celebrated Christmas Day
Mhm.
and big deal. So what we did was we spent Christmas Eve with my parents in Waynesboro. And we got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and we drove all the way to Summit, New Jersey in time for Christmas dinner. And the next morning we looked at each other and said, we're not going to do this again.
Mhm.
Because we pleased everybody, but we were left kind of hanging out here.
Mhm. That's been our pattern for the last couple of years too.
It's hard to please everybody.
Definitely. And I think just with the idea of like, it's challenging to please everybody. There's a lot of opinions and usually we're gathering with family because we care about them. So we do hope that people feel cared for. But when these other factors come in and we're all navigating stress differently, it can either explode or just make it really challenging to be present in the moment and actually appreciative and joyful of the experience. I think one thing to consider is that communication styles in conflict, there's a lot that goes on physiologically that can influence how we are able to show up and whether or not that's congruent with how we want to show up or not. And so considering those factors makes a lot of sense. And I think families often have some people who are in a passive role and some people who are in a more aggressive role, and people who experience passivity feel like they have to because this other person takes up so much space that it makes sense for me to be in this role. Because if I also take up space, it's explosive maybe. And so it can be really challenging. If you think about, well, one thing maybe to share is the stress response system. It is exceptionally challenging at a biological level to engage in regulated conversation when you're stressed. There's just barriers for how you're able to do that. So here's something I use with my kid clients. If this is the brain, we have a prefrontal cortex that navigates the thought process, thinking ahead, meaning making, decisions, things like that, and planning. Underneath that, you have your limbic system, which regulates your emotions usually. And then underneath that is the brainstem. So that puts you in kind of your survival mode. When you experience stress of any kind, you can operate from a social engagement place, a fight or flight place, or a freeze response. And so the body is really working to figure out where it's safe to engage in conflict or not. So maybe you have patterns with certain people and you say, I've tried this and it was so activating and upsetting for me, I'm not going to keep engaging with that. And your body is going to just really not convince you to step out of that for probably good reason. Or maybe you experience some passivity and if that didn't go well either, maybe your needs didn't get met. And so now you show up and you take up a lot more space with some more aggressive communication. And so for you to have a calm and regulated conversation when you're upset, it really is one of the highest physiological demands on your system to have a regulated conversation in conflict. So that's why these styles come up. So I think that there's not like good or bad, they're just true, like they're just options. And if we can think about how to regulate a little differently, then maybe we can shift what you're allowed or afforded in terms of your capacity to engage with people. And so when I say that, these people often find each other. My husband has a more passive experience in conflict, and that has a lot to do with his family system. A lot of them have passive communication. And so I, by contrast, feel like I need to be very clear and direct about my needs. And so I say them because I am impatient, and that can appear aggressive to him when I think that I'm being assertive. Assertive is the happy medium where I'm being direct and being clear, and that's it. You know, the emotionality, you have to be pretty regulated to be assertive. You have to be in a place of relative calm to be able to articulate yourself in a way that could land you in this camp. So clear, kind, and direct. You say what's true for you. So this is not the, oh, sorry, I missed your call, we were so busy. It's just like, oh, I wasn't available to pick up your call. That's just true. When you have people being more direct with you, if you have a more passive default, that sounds like aggression sometimes. And I experience this a lot with my mother-in-law. So maybe I'm trying to be clear and direct, and she just shuts down because she has a more passive style. And so I'm not trying to harm her, but my directness really is activating for her. And then I can get resentful about that because I want to show up and be clear, kind, and direct about my needs. And so it just kind of makes this swarm, right? It's really hard to change other people's communication styles. So you've got to start with your own first, or maybe just consider, like, how am I engaging with people when there's conflict? Am I fine with that, or do I want to shift it? Is my hope for you all to think about today. Because if you have an internal locus of control, or you feel like you can impact your environment, then perhaps these family conflicts don't have to be can't you kick down the road for years and years and years, right? That's what my family does. Yeah.
We have a son and his wife and two babies, and they are flying down Thanksgiving and Christmas. And at a certain time, Robert calls and he said, we made our plans of when we're coming and where we're going. So this is when we're coming. Yes. And this is when we're going, and this is when we're going. And then Christmas. Yeah. And so a friend of mine said, well, I didn't help you. This is what they're going to do. Well, John and I decided that this is one of the issues that we're not going to get upset about. And it's okay with us if it works for them. But it is hard.
Absolutely. And I think, again, like you're pointing out, that flexibility is what helps you navigate that. So if you can be flexible with them, then you're not upset by them giving you kind of the agenda, maybe. And I think that when we're in a stress response, rigidity is the default. And so we're either going to be rigid and always move in the camp of withdrawing, or we're always going to approach maybe in a way that doesn't match with how we actually want to present. But flexibility, if you can access that, is a wonderful coping skill. So it sounds like I'm cultivating that supports the change of plans. Yeah.
In this world today, when more and more people communicate by text,
Mhm.
they miss body language, they miss tone of voice, they miss facial expressions, things that we need to tell the other person the right interpretation of what we're saying and receiving.
Mhm.
So many things I've seen misconstrued on a text.
Absolutely.
Because a person could say it as a joke, or as a pun, or as a whatever, and the other person is so angry because they took it the wrong way. And you know, we're just missing all that without the body language and the tone of voice and the expressions and the throwing up with hands when you say something or whatever it is.
Right.
It's missing it.
Sometimes too, that expression, I'm just not gonna let this bother me, winds up in your stomach line.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I think you make a good point around, that has a lot to do with physiology. So you all are picking up on feedback from my nose to here, like in an unconscious way at a like subcortical way, to let you know if it's safe enough for you to be like paying attention to me and sitting down. And so there's a lot, you pay attention to prosody, you pay attention to eye contact, you pay attention to posture and body language. All of that stuff gives you feedback to help you know what stress response you need to be in. And so if you're only communicating non-verbally, or I guess not in person, that can really leave lots of room for people to read into stuff. And I think sometimes people may feel like they're really working to communicate clearly, and it just doesn't translate for a variety of reasons, for sure. We also have the opportunity to project a lot onto our family. So maybe I'm upset about this thing, and then I hear a comment from them, and I'm like, everybody knows that I'm a fraud and that they all think this thing. And so now I'm like, kind of just like, I don't know, spiky or prickly, because I assume that everybody is thinking the same thing. So kind of managing like what is mine, like what's happening, what's my part to own in this, like in this conversation, and then what's theirs, right? And can we have a conversation about just moving past it? That's the part that I find the hardest, is to have conflict where it's like, I'm not trying to dismantle our relationship. I want to work this out so that we have a more vibrant and vital, like there's more vitality in our relationship, because we can move past this. It's not to just deconstruct or anything like that, which is why assertive communication is supportive versus aggression, because you're not trying to cut people down. That's not going to maybe support the relationship if you can access that. Yeah.
Also, I think one's role really changes through the passages of time.
For sure.
And so I know that for me, my children are my next of kin, but I'm not their next of kin.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my sons, until they're married, they're my next of kin, but now they have spouses, they have children. And so they still are big on my horizon, but I'm a lot smaller on their horizon.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as it should be. I mean, I wouldn't want to have my sons think I'm their next of kin, or their wife, or way out of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a factor in terms of making decisions and who does what, when, and all of that.
And in the grief around like expectations as things change.
Yeah, and if I'm waiting for them to decide something, like, when exactly are you coming for Thanksgiving, or am I going there? You know, what's happening? They may be waiting, or my son and daughter-in-law may be waiting for her mom, who is waiting for her other children, who's waiting for his boss, who's waiting for, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's just much more complicated.
Absolutely. And a lot of layers to consider, for sure.
Yeah.
We're going to wrap up with just some conversation in smaller groups. And I'm curious if y'all can think about times you've engaged in conflict that you think has gone well, share the tips, and then times where you're like, this was not great. It wasn't my shining moment, but I'm sharing it with the group to get maybe some support around that. So just think about maybe like how conflict shows up for you. I do have some some handouts for you all. It's nothing groundbreaking. This isn't gonna change your entire life, I don't think. But it should some outline on maybe like a recipe for a certain community. You can think through maybe how to support yourself, or your family. This is something and you can give to whoever, around maybe like what this actually sounds like in practice. So yeah, just move around, you maybe get into some 4 or 5, and consider not being conflict. And how you might want to
Okay, great, very much. Comments.
Yeah. Hopefully Mary would like that.
Yeah. It's like, it's supposed to be feel like it impacts, so they're going to look like the eye. It's like, but now it's not. I'm worried about that. Here. Yeah. No, that's good. We're inside, yeah. They're upstairs. There's a lot of eyes to up. So they go. Yeah. Second grade. So you can like some other technology. And we go on the streets and
And for some extent, that might be helpful sometimes if you have a class on people skills. And from what I'm hearing from here, I almost think that might be something I'll recommend to the adult formation class, and maybe you'll be interested in pursuing something like that. And bring perfect. And bring, yeah, and especially to go off and when we're dealing with these issues that where this fit into this in our relationship with God. And always trying to bring it in and into that for us. But thank you, Matt. Oh my goodness, thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. Right. I mean, it's